Hey, in this video, I'm going to be teaching you 3 different ways to paint white flowers using watercolor. We're going to be painting a white rose, chamomile, and a white hydrangea bundle using those 3 different techniques for painting white flowers. So if you're ready, let's dive in. All right, so to paint white flowers, I'm going to show you 3 different ways to paint loose style white watercolor flowers. We're going to start with a white rose, and it's going to be we're going to add other flowers, white flowers in this piece too, like hydrangea and chamomile. But to just as a disclaimer, with watercolor, we're not painting with white paint. So it's actually what we're going to be painting is the shadows in the area around the flower and accenting, because a white flower, when you walk by it in sunlight or if it's in shadow or whatever, it's not purely white. It has grayish blue colors in the shadowy areas. There's the yellow center, the leaves around it, maybe there's some touch of pink or yellow in the petal. So we're painting the color around the petal with the leaves and the stems. We're painting the center of the flower, and then we're adding any sort of shadow detail on the petals with a light gray or light like blushy brown color. So I'm going to mix up some yellow ochre with a touch of opera rose and a lot of water. So we're doing white flowers. We want to make sure that our mixes for our accent colors on the petals are really, really washy, really, really white. But I'm going to actually start with a really light blue gray for my watercolor rose. And I'm going to maybe add a touch of opera rose to it. So I've got some Prussian blue, a touch of Mars black, and a lot of water and a touch of opera rose. Maybe a little bit of yellow ochre to blend in the warm undertone. So it kind of matches the whole feel, the rest of the painting. So I'm gonna grab some of this pigment, this mixture that I have here, but I'm also going to rinse off the majority of that in my water cup and then make sure to dab on my paper towel so we're not just, adding big blobs in puddles of color. And we're gonna go for a rose. This is gonna be really light, but it's just going to be basically the goal you wanna go for is painting not just with your brush, but also with your arm and your wrist. So the overall shape of a rose is we're gonna go for like a David Austin kind of fluffy color. And how I start is I'm gonna start with my size 16 brush and we'll just kind of add this here. Lightly paint in, so we've got some darker color there, but let's do it much lighter for the rest. These thin strokes that are kind of cradling the center of the flower. So we're giving it this like V shape with these light strokes. These are our tops of some petals, that thin edge. And then we're going to start pulling out bigger petals. So we've got some good gray there. That's going to give us a nod to this being a white flower, but now let's really lighten that. So I've got basically just water on my brush, and I'm pointing to the center of the flower with my size 16 round and fanning it out for these big, big petals. I'm going to grab some yellow ochre and yellow at this point so I can take advantage of this being still wet. And I'm going to add in my stamen area and grab some more of this light gray. And everything is pointing back to the center of the flower. So we're going to add some petals poking up here. I like the yellow bleeding into the grayish, whitish, white petals. Maybe some pink at this point. Just a touch. This isn't a pink rose. So now I'm going in with my gray color and I'm just darkening some of these ridges of the petals. But once this dries, I'm gonna add some shadow to the petal to create some depth, so it's not just a blob of gray. So we've got our white rose there, and we're gonna add detail to it a little bit later once that all dries. But next, I'm gonna grab a size 16 or size 6 brush, and we're gonna paint some chamomile. So for chamomile, I'm gonna do these like yellow, really thick mixture of yellow ochre and lemon yellow deep. And maybe we have a cluster of chamomile here and a cluster of hydrangea down here. So I'm just gonna use a 35-ish degree hold on my brush, and we're gonna paint in the center of our chamomile cluster. Nothing really that I'm following, just kind of imagining the surrounding petals. And I'm gonna go in with, let's do something funky, like a sap green mixed with Prussian blue or manganese blue. So with this cluster of flowers, what I'm trying to do is basically paint around the petals with my leaves. So I'm going to outline a petal here and paint a leaf. We're keeping it loose, so we're not doing this for every single. Making sure to mix up my greens. Some are yellow green, some are blue green. It's kind of like a dance, just pulling out the leaves in the background of these white flowers. Then once we got the majority of these flowers kind of pulled in, like detail, we're gonna go in with a lighter wash of that green and just kind of add in some of those petals. So basically what we're doing here is we're painting the negative space. And we're keeping it not too concentrated in one area. We're making sure it's very organic feeling. And maybe some areas having stems poking through instead of leaves. But a lot of my strokes are just kind of scribbles. And I'm not thinking about my next step. I'm just kind of like letting my brush do the work for me. And as I get further away from all these yellow dots, I'm still adding in some of these squiggles on the outside. That's a fun bleed. To add some extra fluff to this kind of ball or cluster of chamomile. But some of these squiggles are actually lines, like outlines of petals, so we have that nod to this being really small, delicate individual flowers. Like so. And then we can, you know, pull in some more leaves. There's our little chamomile cluster. I want to pull in that dark manganese blue sap green color for some leaves around this rose too. So we've got a light grayish color for our first white flower. Then we are painting negative space. Our next flower, we're going to basically similar to what we did for negative space, but it's actually going to be the shadow on the individual petals. And it's going to be a cluster of hydrangea for this one. But since this is really light over here with this rose, I'm going to add in a leaf to kind of define that a bit more. I'm not painting my usual style of leaves. I'm making it more jagged and really tight and close to the edge of these petals. So I'm using the side of the brush and pushing and releasing, and then kind of bringing it down with the tip of the brush, giving it this jagged look. Just using the side of my brush now to kind of give it these nods of leaves turning different angles. Now you can really see the flower starting to pop because we're painting the background. And we'll pull out more stems and vines and stuff. Once we get our third white flower in there. All right, so for this one, we're gonna be painting hydrangea. And I'm going to tie in some of this blue-green and the gray for the shadow color on the petals for white hydrangea. So I've got Prussian blue, a touch of manganese blue, and black, Mars black. Maybe some sap green. And then the color I have on my brush, I'm going to rinse the majority of it off and just do a very light touch of it. And I'm using my size 6 brush, so similar to the vibe that we did with our chamomile, we're just kind of letting our arm do the work and floating around the cluster. We've got an idea of our cluster being right here. I'm going to do the same with the hydrangea, except instead of having squiggles for the area or outlines around some of these petals, I'm going to basically lay a 35-degree angle on my brush and lay like a little angle of a petal and just kind of adding in these little teardrop shapes here and there. Some lighter, some darker. And we'll do the center of these very soon, so you'll see it kind of come to life. But I'm just floating around where I think this cluster should go. And then to pull this together, we're gonna add some stems. I don't want it to be too contrasting with this light blue-gray. So I'm gonna mix it in with my light blue-gray mixture here with some green for the stems. So the main stem is gonna be thicker, and then we have these other guys kind of pulling out. Just kind of dragging my brush, flicking it with my fingers. And I want it to be more of a ball, so we're gonna make this a little more round. And the center of these flowers, we're just gonna do a really dark blue. You can do yellow if you want, or reference a photo of white hydrangea. But I'm just gonna make it a little bit monochromatic. This is a loose style painting, so we don't, need to make it hyper realistic or anything. Kind of just going with the overall theme here, which is blue-greens. And we're gonna do some small dots to show centers of flowers. I'm doing 3 little dots. And I might use the same dark color and kind of outline some of these petals to give it extra fluff. I'm just coming back over to my chamomile and accenting any of these petals. Now that my main cluster is all painted with this, I'm going to go back in and fill it in a little bit here and there with a couple more, maybe bring some down here too. And then grabbing that manganese, Prussian blue, and sap green mix. Painting in that negative space. Might pull in some of that yellow down here too, just for kicks and giggles to kind of balance it. And then we're going to add some of that darker detail to the rose. So this chamomile cluster will be smaller than that one, but because that's our hero cluster. Just composition wise, I want to make sure that it feels balanced. Obviously we have very different flowers all together here in kind of bundles, but if this is, chamomile has a lot of really long stems, and so we'll probably get some peeking down here as well, and it just helps to balance out the piece a little bit more because we're not just looking up here and then looking down here, we're kind of flowing. For these more squiggly leaves, I'm just starting with a vertical hold, thin stroke, and then squiggling as I put pressure and releasing. Now that I've got a lot of my leaves pulled out, I can kind of go around this outer edge of the chamomile cluster and color in some more of the background. Negative space, but not too much. Just giving it a hint. Okay, now we're ready to add more punchy detail to our rose. I'm actually going to do something wild and crazy. It's just a crazy hair I'm having right now, and I don't know if it's going to work, but this is what you do when you're just painting and you're going with the flow. I want to do high contrast, and something contrasting to green is red. We're going to do a little bit of a different red, and we're going to do pink, bright neon opera rose pink just by itself as the highlight color to this rose. So we have the edge of these petals that I'm going to pull out. We're just seeing the top edge here. And maybe in these crease areas. Just putting pressure on my brush and then kind of fanning it out. It's getting much lighter over here, so I'm going to do little to no pink, if any at all. I'm going to buff this out. It's a little too much pink. So I'm going to put some water on it and soak it up with the dry brush. Blends it in a little bit more too. Same over here. So basically accenting with pink, which is different. You can do, like a darker gray. If you don't want something so different, you can do a darker gray or a darker, or one of these lighter blue colors, blue-green colors, up to you. But I think this is fun. go. 3 different types of white flowers. I'm gonna add some leaves down here for our hydrangea, and then we can call it a day. Hydrangea have those big leaves, but they're more towards the stem, so I'm just gonna pull some. Now, last but not least, I'm going to add a little leaf situation poking out over here for our rose. And this maybe goes off the page. As we're in this wild garden scene here. And the hydrangea is falling this way. We've got blooms of chamomile up here. You can add more chamomile or other wildflower type of things, white flowers or not. There you go, 3 different ways for painting white flowers in watercolor, loose watercolor. There you have it. 3 beautiful ways of painting white flowers using negative space, using shadows, and using a really light washy color to bring out the petals and adding details if necessary later. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Drop in the comments below which of the 3 flowers was your favorite to paint, or which of the 3 flowers was the most challenging for you to paint. And I want you to remember that painting like this, using your brain to think about the negative space or the area that you're not typically painting, is challenging. So it's gonna take some practice doing it over and over again. You might paint the rose, 15 times and only get 1 rose that you actually like. But that helps you develop that muscle memory in the eye for negative space and, painting differently than you normally would with watercolor when you're using something that is actually color. So I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications for this channel so you don't miss any of our future videos, because we are dropping 2 tutorials a week usually, and they're always really good. So if you don't want to miss any of our future tutorials, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell icon or make sure you're notified when we release a new tutorial so you don't miss anything. I'll see you in the next tutorial.